Every technological revolution has a hidden hinge. Not the device, not the headline. The material nobody notices until it becomes scarce. In the electric vehicle revolution, that hinge is lithium. And here's what nobody tells you. Nearly 3/4 of the world's known lithium reserves sit in a single, fragile triangle stretching across Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile. High-altitude deserts, salt flats, thin air. Here's why this matters. Every EV battery, every grid-scale storage system, every promise of a post-oil future depends on a resource controlled by countries that history shows are rarely allowed to keep full control of what the world suddenly needs most. This is where the pattern begins. The story starts long before electric cars went mainstream. In the mid-20th century, lithium was obscure, used in lubricants, pharmaceuticals, and niche industrial processes. No one imagined it would become the backbone of global transportation. Then chemistry changed. In the 1970s and 1980s, lithium-ion battery research accelerated. By the 1990s, it powered laptops and phones. By the 2010s, it became the beating heart of electric vehicles. Demand exploded. Prices followed. And the world started asking an uncomfortable question: where does lithium actually come from? The answer leads to the Andes. High in the salt flats, Salar de Atacama in Chile, Salar del Hombre Muerto in Argentina, Salar de Uyuni in Bolivia. Brine pools beneath the surface hold extraordinary concentrations of lithium. Not hard rock, not mines you can blast open. Brine, liquid chemistry trapped under crusts of salt, extracted slowly through evaporation. This is not oil. This is patience. Years of pumping, months of sun exposure, delicate processing, and that difference changes everything. At first, it looked like a miracle. Countries long overshadowed by global powers suddenly sat on the foundation of the clean energy future. Argentina opened its doors to foreign investment. Chile refined its regulatory system. Bolivia spoke openly about national control and sovereignty. The triangle looked poised to become the new OPEC, only cleaner, quieter, and more essential. Then the bill arrived. Here's what nobody tells you. Owning lithium reserves is not the same as controlling lithium power. Let me show you exactly how this divergence happens. Lithium extraction is slow. Refining is complex. Battery-grade lithium requires specialized chemical processing, capital-intensive facilities, and deep integration with global supply chains. The resource sits in South America. The processing sits elsewhere. And value follows processing. Chile learned this early. By the 1990s and 2000s, it became the world's leading lithium producer, thanks to relatively stable institutions and partnerships with private firms. Revenues flowed, but control diluted. Pricing power remained limited. Lithium sold into global markets where buyers, automakers, battery firms, governments dictated terms. Not leverage, volume. Argentina followed a different path. It liberalized. It welcomed international firms. Production expanded rapidly in the late 2010s and early 2020s. Output grew. Investment surged. But coordination lagged. Provinces negotiated independently. Infrastructure strained. The danger wasn't what they saw. It was what they ignored, the fragmentation of bargaining power in a market that rewards scale and unity. Bolivia chose resistance. Sitting atop the largest lithium reserve on Earth, it rejected foreign dominance and insisted on state-led development, nationalization, sovereignty, control. But here's the trap. Without capital, technology, and market access, lithium stayed underground. Projects stalled. Revenues never materialized. The world moved on. Everyone thought Bolivia was rich. It wasn't, yet. This is where the pattern hardens into something familiar. Resource-rich regions often face the same crossroads. Open fast and lose control, close tight and lose relevance. Neither path guarantees power. And lithium, despite its futuristic image, follows the same old rules. As EV demand surged after 2020, the imbalance became visible. Automakers raced to secure supply. Battery manufacturers signed long-term contracts. Prices spiked. Shortages loomed. But instead of South American states setting terms, Downstream players locked in advantage. China, in particular, moved early, not to dominate reserves, but to dominate processing. By the early 2020s, China controlled the majority of global lithium refining capacity. Raw material flowed out. Value flowed elsewhere. Not extraction. Conversion. Here's why this matters. Lithium without refining is like crude oil without refineries. It exists, but it does not move markets. It does not shape policy. It does not create strategic leverage. And the Lithium Triangle, for all its geological wealth, remains structurally dependent on external systems to turn saltwater into power. Environmental pressure compounds the problem. Lithium brine extraction consumes massive amounts of water in some of the driest places on Earth. Indigenous communities protest. Ecosystems strain. Governments face a trade-off between accelerating production and preserving fragile environments. At first, it looked like a clean alternative. Then the bill arrived. Political instability adds another layer. Regulatory shifts, election cycles, contract revisions. Investors hesitate, projects delay, timelines stretch, and lithium markets, unlike oil markets, cannot respond quickly. Supply elasticity is low. New projects take years, which means every delay tightens the future. The world assumes lithium will scale smoothly. Analysts suggest that assumption may be dangerously optimistic. Here's what nobody tells you. The electric transition is not constrained by ideology or demand. It is constrained by chemistry, geography, and time. And the Lithium Triangle sits at the center of all three. This is where history begins to echo. In the 20th century, oil-rich regions faced similar moments of awakening. Control the spigot, or be controlled by the market. Some coordinated. Some fractured. Some nationalized too early. Some opened too fast. The outcomes varied, but the pattern repeated. Resource wealth alone never guaranteed influence. Systems did. And now the Lithium Triangle stands at the same threshold. Argentina debates royalties versus growth. Chile revisits state involvement. Bolivia reassesses isolation. Each decision feels domestic. None are. Because lithium is not just another export. It is the input into the global energy transition itself. Whoever controls its flow controls the pace of electrification. The danger isn't scarcity today, it's bottlenecks tomorrow. If demand continues rising and supply coordination fails, lithium prices could surge again. EV affordability could suffer, governments could face backlash, transition timelines could slip, and pressure would mount. Not on automakers or consumers, but on the countries sitting atop the resource. This leads to the unresolved question that defines the second half of this story. If Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile own most of the world's lithium, but others control the processing, pricing, and pace of deployment, who really holds power in the electric future? Because history suggests that resource revolutions reward those who move beyond extraction first. Power does not sit where resources are found. It settles where systems are built. Here's what nobody tells you. The Lithium Triangle's greatest risk is not running out of lithium, but becoming trapped at the bottom of the value chain just as the world locks into electric dependency. Here's why this matters. In every resource transition, the winners are not those who extract fastest, but those who convert, standardize, and control downstream flows. And lithium is already following that script. This is where the mechanism comes into focus. Lithium does not go from salt flat to battery on its own. It must be processed into battery-grade chemicals, lithium carbonate or lithium hydroxide, under tight tolerances. This step determines quality, cost, and compatibility with EV supply chains. Analysts suggest this is the true choke point of the electric transition. And it does not sit in Argentina, Bolivia, or Chile. It sits in refining hubs thousands of miles away. Let me show you exactly how this shapes power. When automakers plan factories, they don't ask who owns lithium. They ask who can deliver refined material on time, at scale, and at predictable prices. Whoever answers that question gains leverage. Contracts follow. Capital follows. Political influence follows. This is why China's early investment in refining capacity mattered more than buying mines. Not ownership. Control. At first, the Lithium Triangle appeared poised to flip the script. Governments discussed national lithium strategies. Regional coordination was floated. State participation increased. But coordination is fragile. Argentina's decentralized model fragments bargaining power. Chile's regulatory recalibration creates uncertainty. Bolivia's state-led approach limits speed. Each country moves on its own clock while global demand accelerates on another. The danger wasn't what they saw. It was what they ignored, the pace mismatch between geology and markets. Some economists argue the triangle could still coordinate, creating a lithium bloc that shapes prices and standards. In theory, this resembles OPEC. In practice, lithium resists cartel logic. Supply is slower. Demand is more fragmented. Substitutes exist, though imperfect. And political alignment across three very different systems is difficult to sustain. If this pattern applies, fragmented coordination favors downstream players who can arbitrage differences and lock in supply quietly. Environmental pressure deepens the trap. Water scarcity, indigenous land rights, and ecological damage impose real limits on expansion. These constraints are not moral abstractions, they are operational bottlenecks. Projects slow, permits delay, production caps tighten. Meanwhile, battery demand does not wait. Automakers respond by diversifying supply: Australia, Africa, recycling, alternative chemistries. Each workaround reduces the triangle's leverage. This is where the historical echo becomes loud. In past resource booms, regions that failed to climb the value chain became price takers. Copper, rubber, oil, extraction zones prospered briefly, then stagnated as processing and manufacturing concentrated elsewhere. Lithium threatens to repeat this cycle unless the triangle shifts from exporter to integrator. But integration requires choices that are politically difficult. Building refining capacity demands capital, energy, water, and regulatory stability. It also risks environmental backlash. Partnering with foreign firms brings expertise but dilutes sovereignty. Going it alone preserves control but slows scale. Here's the trap. Delay too long, and the market locks in alternative suppliers. Move too fast, and domestic backlash grows. Either way, timing matters more than intention. Consider the scenarios ahead. In one scenario, the Lithium Triangle coordinates investment in refining and downstream manufacturing. Value capture increases. Bargaining power rises. The region becomes indispensable not just for extraction, but for delivery. This is the soft landing, a difficult but transformative shift. In another scenario, coordination falters. Each country maximizes short-term exports. Refining remains external. Prices fluctuate. When supply eventually loosens, margins collapse. The triangle becomes rich in reserves but poor in influence. This is the familiar outcome. In a third scenario, environmental and political constraints slow development sharply. Global supply tightens. Prices spike. Pressure mounts on governments to accelerate extraction. Social conflict intensifies. Foreign alternatives gain urgency. Lithium becomes a bottleneck that slows the EV transition itself. None of these outcomes are guaranteed, but all reveal the same underlying truth. Lithium's power is conditional, not automatic. Here's what nobody tells you about the electric future. It does not eliminate resource politics. It relocates them, from oil fields to salt flats, from pipelines to processing plants, from tankers to contracts. The Lithium Triangle is not the end of this story. It is the beginning of a new version of an old one. Not clean versus dirty, not green versus black, but extraction versus control. And the final lesson cuts through the optimism. Owning 75% of the world's lithium does not guarantee dominance in the EV age. What guarantees dominance is deciding who turns that lithium into motion, and on whose terms. Because in every energy transition, the countries that stop at digging eventually watch others drive away with the future.